And don't forget to hit record this time.
Yeah, no. Trying to go to YouTube.
Excellent.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to Cory and Cory launching a WordPress product live. This is session 18. And we were just kind of in prep for this real quick, just talking about a little of the things that's been going on in our lives. It's always fun to talk real life with a great person like Cory. So this time we're just going to kind of talk about catching up. We've been out kind of the last 2, maybe 3 weeks, I want to say. And I have been on, last week I was at CloudFest in Austin for Post Status. Then we extended and went on a epic Clark W. Griswold type road trip. Got to see Carlsbad Caverns. And
they were closed.
Yes. No dead ants on the roof of the minivan when we did rent a minivan. I had to go Griswold style. But I know you've had things going on too. So that's a little snippet for me, just trying to kind of get things a little bit better sane for me work-wise. And I think that's in preparation for the real conversation here. But you want to update us on what you've been up to?
Yeah, and on my end, so I've got, one main client, and I have a monthly. They ask me to stay within a window of how much I work, and what I actually like about that is I tend to work a little less the beginning of the month, and then which lets me work on side projects or lets me work on the house or whatever, and then towards the end of the month, the days get longer to make sure I hit my quota and maximize my budget. But so at the beginning of the month, I wound up helping my dad drive from South Carolina up to Maine, which is a really fun road trip with dad. But, and of course, the client website goes down when I'm the farthest from my computer, sitting at a restaurant in Fredericksburg, Virginia. If you ever have the opportunity, it's a beautiful little place to stop. But anyway, and then you can probably hear from my voice. I think last week I begged off because I was sick as a dog. And it's funny. It actually, you're like, oh, it's been, I think 2-3 weeks. And I'm like, it feels like it's been months, because I spent at least a few days last week, literally just in bed in a NyQuil haze, so it felt like weeks went by, and, and then you come out of that and you've got to scramble to make up work and get caught up on life. And then for me, time always means house projects. So we've built another 11 times 8, so 88 feet of fencing. No, and then we turn a corner, so about 120 feet of fencing, stockade fencing, because we're getting a new foster dog. So setting up a room for him. And anyway, yeah, it just gets crazy. And so I think you and I touched base briefly last week and said, okay, so, that's fine. We missed a week or two. Let's start moving forward. I was like, all right, I'm still working on a review of the product. I'll get you a new version for Post Status. I don't think you heard from me until 9 minutes ago. That never happened. So yeah, but it's like, and I hate to, it's easy to fall into like, well, it's not out yet, so it, there are no expectations other than our own, which is true. But it's also like, I mean, this is part of why we do this, right? Like we're at least part of our aspirations is freedom, to make our own choices, to manage our own hours, to work on what we want to work on. Which also means, I mean, family comes first and health comes first, and, and paying clients come first when you're at this stage. So, these are just things we have to juggle and keep trying to make progress. I mean, it says everything to me that you and I at least are like, okay, let's keep talking once a week. Where are we at? And because I have other people who I've worked with who many other people who ghost or who just want to stop. There's inherently so much shame in all of it that the moment they miss a day or a deadline or don't hit the mark in some fashion, don't want to talk about it. I have friends who we've been talking about collaborating for years, talking about like music or art or whatever. And now we've gone months where we'll talk every week or every month, how are you? How are the kids? Da, da, da. And we literally won't talk about the subject now because because one of us didn't move forward with it. There's shame associated with it. So,
I definitely
none of it's that important,
Yeah, exactly. Like we started with really good intentions and openness. When it occurs to me is just kind of your references back to music and bands and stuff is like, I played an instrument when I was in like middle school, but I've not been in a band, but it occurs to me, it's like, it seems like that you're kind of struggling to kind of get something going. And then there's seasons of life that happened. This stage of my life and my career, I really see more of the seasonal aspects of life better than I ever have. And you go, just things you can't anticipate, or if you tried to, you'd have another set of problems. And it's just like you said, like we got other priorities, but it's important for us to keep talking. I think too, when I think about entrepreneurship, I think there's like real hard work, just doing things, trying to do it consistently, getting things out there, getting the next thing. And then there's this bigger part, which is maybe somebody would have called it luck, but it's like magic. You stay around doing something. Maybe bands operate like this. I don't know, but like you got enough interest, something's there, you just haven't figured it out yet. And then a magical moment. And I say magic because it's like, oftentimes in my career, specifically my professional career as an entrepreneur, couldn't have planned those things, man. They just happen, however I might have tried to take credit for them, they just happen. And it's like the reading I've been and work I've been doing too personally is like creativity. You don't control creativity. Those really magical moments we're talking about, they kind of blossom out. And there was somebody I was just like, well, Anna, who runs Vita Bars, Lindsay and her have been friends for a decade. Anna tried so many things over the years, so many things. And then Vita Bars was the spark, the magic that made it happen. Now she's full time with it, and she's got employees and all that kind of stuff. So like all that time, it's kind of like learning the piano. People go, oh, you're at the piano, you're doing this beautiful thing at the wedding or whatever it is. They don't think about all those years spent,
right,
in the practice of it. And it's kind of like that moment too. It's like, I'm diatribing for a second, but do enough things to get to a moment that you probably didn't plan. I think most of us, at least the entrepreneurs I know, would say, yep, that's about
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
However, we like to think we control it and plan it. We don't.
And there's time. Sometimes you just have to let time go by. It's like in music, it's one of the hardest things I've had to learn. It's like for years, I made music and put out music, made music and put out music. And then I actually started writing music that people were like, oh, this is a summertime song. It's the end of the summer. We're not going to put it out now. That'd be dumb. So we're going to sit on it. And it's like in actual pop music, you can find out that there were pop songs, but huge hits. And in our minds, you're picturing, Taylor Swift yesterday was in the recording studio, and then today you're hearing the song because music can be live. And in this day and age, sometimes that's true, and it's truer than it used to be. It used to be that a band would go into a studio and produce an album, and it would take months and yada yada. but a lot of the times tunes or tracks or albums are actually held back to try to be released strategically. It's like big movies that sit on shelves for, years potentially, because they're like, this is a Christmas Day blockbuster. We're not going to release, or a summertime when all the kids are out of school type of movie, we're not going to release it on the second day of school on a Tuesday. That's dumb, but we don't really think about that. But sometimes there's strategic reasons, and sometimes like this, where it's like, I'm a lot better about it than I used to be, especially since years ago now. So for a while, I tried to make music an actual career or second career. And it really broke my heart. And so I stepped away from it for a while. And then when I was getting back into it, this is where having an amazing spouse is worth everything. Lindsay and I sat down, my Lindsay, spelled with an A, sat down and she's like, okay, so you want to get back into music. Great. Like, how does it not break your heart again? And one of the things that came out of that conversation was me being able to articulate, like, okay, I'm not taking it as seriously this time. It's a hobby. And so suddenly a lot of things changed. One, I couldn't just go out and buy new instruments or, throw money at it the way I used to, sure. But it also meant that like I could work on, like, I have found that I make a lot of music in the fall and then tend to not make any music, but a lot of that music that I finish, I can like leak out again a track a month, or I can wait till summertime and put it out or whatever. And so it's like I've got these big waves rather than it just being, picturing this straight line of productivity. And I think that kind of goes for this stuff too, like this stuff, entrepreneurship, side hustles, they're side hustles. And for a long time, I was like, I want this to be a day job. Still would love it. I'd still love my own product to be my primary focus. Then it's a job. That's very different, right? From side hustles, ideas, putting out little apps, little ideas, little products. I mean, and so it's picking things up, putting things down, and these days being okay with, again, letting some time go by or occasionally changing priorities, even for a little while. Because there was a time when I remember one time in particular that I was in between paying client gigs and came up with an idea for an app and was like, okay, I've got to crank this out. And then it's also got to make money. And it was like the dumbest little idea. I won't even share it. I'm embarrassed. But it was an app that nobody wanted. It solved a problem that nobody had. It was just an idea. But I remember like going, this is the first time where it has to make money. And I was like, it's never going to make money. Like, and I'm putting myself in danger here. That's dumb, and that's not to say that there aren't entrepreneurial journeys with VC capital or, we've got to double down and make this our full-time gig and all that stuff. But it's like, at least for me, I find often that if I'm making decisions from a position of desperation, of need, that I'm not going to make the best decision, because my priorities, I can't have proper perspective on it. So stepping back for a few weeks, honestly, what I look forward to is going back into my code, realizing that I did everything wrong and cleaning it up. And then it's a better product. And are we the worse off for having missed a few weeks? Maybe. Who can say? Nothing's obvious. But again, just trying to keep moving forward with it.
I think it's like when we're thinking about bands and hit music or products and entrepreneurs, think about, we're in Anna and yours, my experience in this is like, if there's enough of a fire to keep it going, just enough. It doesn't have to be a bonfire. There'll be times of that for sure. But then mostly it's probably just sometimes a little candle, sometimes just a little mini campfire. But if there's enough fuel in there that there's something here, I think time is on your, like you said, as time goes by, time is on your side, because
Yeah.
it's only a matter of time where things kind of move and shift, and the market, the world, where you're like that. Some of the classic stories, the person I'm thinking of, I think it's a product company and how it came out. It's just a recent example, but the classic ones were in Founders at Work, where you almost backed into what became the hit thing, but you couldn't have kind of planned that.
Right.
Where you were just keeping on a path enough, knew something was here, what didn't, thought you had to beat on it a couple of times, and then just really, it was just the fire was stoked long enough where something did really hit, and it became it became its own thing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot
And
of
I'm
the
not, go ahead.
a lot of the entrepreneurial stories I hear, they aren't like the VC route. We saw a big market and we went after it and we got a big money. That's an outlier, I think. For the millions of us, the rest of us, I think it's mostly backing into something, staying around long enough to find the opportunity that really fits.
Yeah. Chipping away at it, having fun with it, working around real life needs, family, money, mortgages, healthcare, that kind of stuff. And it's like, and that's kind of the difference. Like I have friends who have always wanted to do something. And I'm like, so outside of their job. And so I'm like, so do something, talking art, music, entrepreneurship, whatever. And it's like, you have it in you or you don't is one aspect. And then the timing is right, where it's like, you have that drive and you look around and you're like, okay, right now I've got a couple hours a day, or I've got whatever commitment you need, to work at it. And so, and I think you and I also, I mean, this is the warm and fuzzy moment, but it's like you and I also, I think, have looked for an opportunity to work together for a long time. So it's like, we will continue to be friends and, hopeful partners in something kind of always,
Yep.
I do have to say that we have to keep the fire burning at least long enough so that I get to rock the swag at WordCamp US.
That's true.
These are the real important things.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. No, and I think that's the other part. Pulling down to this is, at the base, I enjoy our conversations. It's this crazy hobby we might have of seeing what's out there, seeing something, following the path down it, and I still believe in the product. But it's funny. It's like, I believe in the product, but I also believe in the path that might lead to something else. Because I mean, well, we're on our second iteration of a product, like not even the same product. There's similarities, but like we went down this path to here. And I think it just adds to the ongoing conversation that we're having, is something's going to happen. Yeah. And then there's a flat, simple, practical byproduct of all this, is that we're having a conversation live and sharing our philosophies, sharing our thoughts, sharing our actions, all these things that has another byproduct that could lead us in another direction altogether, which is good say from a professional opportunity standpoint.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's the being part of the same network, overlapping concentric circles, and kind of seeing what comes out of it. Because I think the other thing I'm thinking from the perspective of somebody who's listening, who's like, right, you are both established, you have, other income streams, or you've got your networks, and you're also putting a product out there. Like, I still see people on entrepreneurial forums that are like, somebody's going to steal my idea. And we have gone the other direction. And obviously we're not the first, but of, just brazenly putting it out there and taking our sweet time. Let's be honest. Like, if we were other people, if we had venture capital, if we, didn't have, responsibilities and mortgages and things, like, we'd eat ramen and we'd have cranked this thing out months ago. And And there's absolutely the chance that somebody listens and goes, oh, that's a great idea, and comes in and steals it and releases it before we do. But it's still, like you just said, it's all part of the journey. We're going to put our own twist on it. We're going to put our own experience on it, and continue to iterate on the product too. So when the product does come out, like, it's very much ours, and it might overlap with other people's, but frankly, it already will. Like, that's the nature of pretty much any product. There's really, almost nothing that hasn't been invented. And I also, another thread I saw recently, again on I think it was Reddit, one of the entrepreneurial ride along, or one of those subreddits, that people were concerned about not having an idea, and everybody else was like, just you don't, okay, don't steal an idea and reproduce it. Like, that's boring. But if you can build the better mousetrap, if you can build the better to-do list, if you can build the better time tracking app, whatever, do it. Like, that's how most competition starts, is these pretty subtle little differences. And then you listen to your users, you listen to your own gut, and you end up, I feel like you end up diverging more and more and more. And or you've got a network that you can tap into that existing client or existing products can't, or whatever. So it's all, I guess, these days I view it as kind of as a game, which is more flippant than it probably sounds, but it's like you're wheeling and dealing, but there's times when you win and there's times when you lose. God, I'm being very metaphorical here, but but it's I view it as an ebb and flow, which is again, I think for me, the way that I had to phrase it a while ago was like, this is a hobby, and so it's meant to be fun. And that isn't to say that everything we do has to be fun, because and or that I don't take it seriously, but it gives you, I think, a little more perspective. I don't have board members that I have to, or stockholders that I have to appease. And I don't have, I don't have to burn the candle at both ends, to make ends meet. If there's a bug and I've got users that are depending on me, that happens with my apps or my plugins once in a while, but it's honestly like once in a while, that's fun. I don't want to do it all the time. But it's like, oh, I've got to do a little hackathon and figure this out until 2 a.m. because a bunch of people are depending on me. That's fun too, So
yeah, it occurs to me it's really a low pressure and stress for us, which is what we both need.
Right.
Having a little bit more, I mean, I guess that's the definition of a hobby, right? Enjoyment without the stress and pressure.
Yeah.
When it switches from hobby, oftentimes it comes with stress and pressure.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, like, I worked at startups. It's like I've done a lot of work in WordPress, and there's been a lot of overlap. But I also, for a long time, specifically was working for and with and at startups of different natures, and some of it was WordPress work, and some of it was not. But they're and I was in New York City for a long, long time, so-called Silicon Alley, during the WeWork stuff. I think I've mentioned that before. You can actually see me in the WeWork movie and all that. And I was surrounded by people who were hustling, all the hustlers and all that stuff. And it's like, most people were chipping away. I mean, almost like almost anything, everything's a bell curve, right? So most of the people on the bell curve were just chipping away, and they weren't burning themselves out, but they weren't also only working a day a week or something. And you had people who were working very, very hard, and you did have people who were there just for the lifestyle and honestly spent all day just playing ping pong, and were there for the beer kegs, but working at different startups, like I've worked at startups where it was all hustle, 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 and we've got to put in long hours, and I found that I got out of those pretty quickly, in part because I would burn out. And I think it would be different if I had been in charge. But like the one main startup where I was CTO was, I think there's a cultural difference here. But it was in Nashville. It wasn't in New York. So there two things were different. We were not in the hustle bustle of New York City. Nashville's a little more easygoing. But also we were generally all, in our 30s and older. We weren't all A-type hustler entrepreneurs. And then stereotypically, down south, you've got family values are, or at least the family itself is prioritized higher. And so we absolutely put in some long days, but for the most part, it was a priority of the founder and subsequently everybody else on the team that, you wouldn't, if it could be done tomorrow, if it was 5 or 6 o'clock, then fine, do it tomorrow, keep chipping away, make good progress. But, but we didn't have to burn ourselves out. We weren't going to really get anywhere by burning ourselves out. And we did just fine till we ran out of money, which happens with startups. But it doesn't always have to be that crazy atmosphere.
Yeah, I can't help but think there's a shift going on globally too with work.
Sorry, what was it like at like iThemes or, some of the bigger places you've worked?
The biggest place I have been beyond like Liquid Web would be I was at a seminary and I think there was 150, 200 people employed by the seminary. Maybe that's too much. No, I bet you there's 100, 150. That was just a very academic setting. So it was money, always money. I loved it because it was a learning stuff. But as far as like in the past, I worked at newspapers, so it was always deadline. I think it was more startup-ish,
Yeah.
Very much startup-ish, except every day we were launching a new product.
That's insane.
Which I think is why I probably liked entrepreneurship, is just the deadlines and product it was so fulfilling to come at the end of the day. But as far as values and stuff goes, I think I learned more in my leadership from what not to do what I didn't like. The obsession with whatever the goal was at the expense of people, and just realistically, like, what are we expecting people to do? I could pour my truck, get it up to 150 miles per hour and get into the red line, and it's eventually going to break. And I don't think you can do that. We try to do that with people. But I took a lot of those lessons leadership wise. I had probably some things I go, I'm not going to do that ever. My last job before I started iThemes, I worked for a really amazing pastor, the one that kind of refreshed my optimism that there could be one who at the time, the way I understood the Bible, was be just a shepherd. He was really awesome. I took his archetype as a leader into iThemes, or eventually when we grew on our team. But you're right. The first couple of years, it was just fun and new. It was creating stuff with hopes and dreams and thoughts and ideas. And it was messy. It was messy, but we got to do some cool stuff. We did like create an office that eventually grew to about 5,000 square feet, and got to my dad actually drove up from about 2 hours from where he lives from us and came and helped us demolish some of the walls that were up at this because we wanted more of that bigger open thing. And we went to IKEA and got all the tables. And I think about all that initial time very romantically, very affectionately, because it was just, we didn't know what we were doing. I sure as hell didn't know what I was doing, but it was fun creating something that, what would our expression look like? And so I would say for the first 3 years, it was just kind of hanging on and having fun with doing some real stuff. There was electricity in the air, and with a whole set of problems that developed out of that. And then I think when we hit about $1 million in revenue, I couldn't manage the team by myself. We were up to at least 10 people by that time. And I think things got more serious and probably professional, in the sense of, okay, we had health insurance probably, I think our first year. As soon as we hired our first couple employees, we needed to get health insurance type of thing. And but I think that year something was different. Is like, we've got something here,
Yeah.
lightning in the bottle. Let's figure out how to protect it, grow it, maintain it. And so we needed some of the structure in there. My value as a leader, though, was always like, I did a talk early on. I was like, I wanted to build a tree house. I wanted to have a tree house, and I wanted to invite all these cool people to play with me in the tree house. That's what it was the first couple of years.
Yeah.
And some really good stuff came out of that. We didn't fall out of the tree house and break our arm, mostly. And then it was shifting of like, holy crap, like, look at this thing. We got to figure out that. And then, but when it really serious was toward the end, when it was like, oh, there was more children of our employees than there were employees. And that was responsibility bearing. And then it's like, treehouse gets a little serious,
Yeah, that's interesting.
So yeah, I look back at that time very fondly and nostalgically. Because I remember it was toward the end of the year. No, it was after the first of the year, and I got invited to be in entrepreneurs organization and said, well, you need $1 million in sales. And I remember going to our accountant like in January and going, okay, where'd we hit? And we were like $70 over $1 million or something. And I thought, we did it. But here's how weird it was. More treehouse thing is like, that money didn't flow directly to me. I wasn't swimming in the lap of luxury or anything. It was like that childish feeling of, I hit the high score on Galaga. Oh, wow. We did it. We did it, And, but what's crazy related to the whole entrepreneur journey is I think that was probably those circumstances and timing and backing into that was just ideal, obviously. But I go, it wasn't all luck.
Right.
It was both. It was all luck, all hard work. It was both. Because I've since then tried to recreate the magic experiment.
Yeah,
it was cool. My partner came in. I think it was our first year. We had our first office. And I would buy these. Sorry, I'm diatribe. These plastic tables from Sam's Club, like basically picnic tables, Yeah. And I was like, these are our desks. I held on to that for the longest time until we got our next office. And Matt was like, my COO, he was like, time to probably upgrade from the white desk. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I did eventually. But I think that was part of that magic. Right time, right place, right people, right partners, right WordPress. But those conditions were really conducive to creativity and magic, and people were pulled in to that. Like Christine was I think it was our second or third team member. Man, solidified the entire direction of the company. Huge. Different people like Dustin Bolton, Matt Danner, and Kristen Wright, and different people that poured into our orbit. I go, wow, this is cool. So like when you talk about band, I go, that's what my band was, because it's just like, we just made really good music for a long time.
Yep.
But how do I recreate that? That's been the obsession for the last 5 years. Until I just go, that was done. That was there.
Yeah.
That was the album we laid, and it's on to new music.
Right. Yeah. Or arriving at a different thing, different voices. You can't just recreate the same thing. Music's always the perfect metaphor in entrepreneurship and programming. And I think there's a reason why so many of us are into music or are musicians or whatever. But yeah, and I think that's what a lot of, like, I was really into all the entrepreneur stories for a long time, and I'm glad I listened to a bunch of the podcasts and and whatnot, but you can't recreate somebody else's story.
You can be inspired by it for sure.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And some of it is good advice, or in certain situations you're like, oh, I remember this thing. It's like reading a playbook, but you still have to know what plays to apply or whatever.
So when I met Lindsay in like 2010, which was that year we hit 1 million, we started this thing that was called Startup Sofa.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because, you're she's clearly in it for the money.
Yes.
That year, you were walking around being like, my company just earned 1 million, what beautiful women want me now.
She remembers, she goes, now, we were dating when you hit your first 6-figure month. And I was like, I realized everything got better with you. It did. That's the other way.
She sees it the other way around.
Yeah.
Smart
and
lady.
And honestly, candidly, it did. Everything did get better when you just had some, like while we're doing this together, not apart, right? It's just better together. I've said that with post status, all the other things. It's like, God, as much as I want to think I'm a solo act, I'm really not.
Well, sure.
I'm much better as a collaborator. So I started this thing called Startup Sofa, and tried to share all these things I had learned. I was laughing, telling her that, and I said, I was 2 years into this thing and thought I could share. I do believe there's a point where if you're like 1 step, 2 step ahead of someone,
sure,
it's very helpful. It's very good stuff. Like, this is where I've gone. But I started laughing. I go, because now I try to share less. I really actively try to not give advice as best I can until I go, okay, now it's time for advice. I just share experiences because I go,
right.
Everybody I hear doing that, you're like, how long have you been doing this? All right. Yeah. Have you been doing it exactly the way they have? Do you know their DNA? Do you know their company? Do you know the mix? Do you know the environment? The answer is no. Very few bands lose their cover singer and can just plug in another person. I think Queen is one of them, but you're like, it's very hard the magic is that band, those people, that time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you can't, and time is the other thing. It's like, you can't, I'm stuck in that a little bit with music. It's like, I am getting better and better at making a genre that basically died 10 years ago. I do it because I love it. And again, there are moments where I'm like, these other genres are more popular. I would get more airplay if I switch genres again, because I switch genres. Like, I rode the wave of a lot of genres for a lot of years, and I was sincere about it. I wasn't, because I've never made music thinking that it was really going to get popular or what have you. But now I make the music that I love the most, and nothing else has come along that I love more. But so if you're the perfect band, but you're making 70s rock, you might have a hard time if it sounds too much just like 70s rock,
Okay, that's so good. Because then I go, there's this other part to the whole magic, is that if you want magic to happen, probably some baseline passion, desire, interest for you, 70s rock music, right? And I go, well, as time goes by, everything works in cycles. We know it might be dead 10 years ago, but it could be alive 10 years from now. And you're like, oh, it's those people that I admire very much, Cory, that have their interests and desires and passions and don't stop.
Mm-hmm.
There's some little fire of that in what we're talking about while we keep showing up on Wednesdays. But I really admire it, because I go, those are the people that something is going to happen. It's probably going to be better than what they imagine, not what they imagine, but better. And I go to like 70s music. You said it's just so organically. It's something I like, probably not going to stop. And then I go, well, if you stay around for another 20 years just doing that, something's going to happen of that.
Right. I mean, that's been proven over and over again, and it doesn't happen for everybody. And I have, there's two things, only two, there are at least two. One is persistence, doing what you love. And but again, this is where, and for me, it had to be calling it a hobby. you have to make your peace with it. I think that's the bigger, the wider way to describe it is like, there are people who are session musicians, there are people who are, who will try to ride each wave to make the next, hit song based on what trends are now. There are people who just grind. Derek Sivers talks a lot about this.
Yeah. Love his work.
And and he's a good example, and other people who are like, okay, well, I'm gonna do other things to to pay the bills, but my passion lies over here, and because it's my passion, I will always keep chipping away at it, kind of thing. But I think so that's sort of one line, and then there's another line which is time and perspective, and because you talk about good things will happen to them eventually, right? And so it's like, for me, part of that I think can be the lowering of expectations, which sounds so old and cynical and beaten down, but it's like I get more out of smaller things musically. Like, again, I'm getting older and older. The likelihood that even if I got a song that blew up, am I going to tour on that at age 46? I generally make music that's popular in England. And so am I going to tour in England at age 46? And I can barely stay awake past 10 p.m. Am I really going to go DJ gigs at 3 a.m? No, and so managing expectations, and it's like and being content with a little bit of airplay here and there, or the people who I've now been friends with for decades coming to me and saying, like, this is the best song you've ever written. I'm like, that's enough. Like, I don't, yes, I would still love endless BBC airplay or something, but the likelihood is less. And so it's the staying consistent for me, plugging away, doing what I want to do, but then also being more and more content with, again, smaller wins. Because it's like there's, it's hard not to, like, I am reacting to what you just said of, like, there's a lot of entrepreneur advice that the entrepreneurs that I was following, like, for years, I wanted to go to Rob Walling and Mike. They do Startups for the Rest of Us. And they do a conference, MicroConf.
Yeah.
For years, I wanted to go to MicroConf. And then I went to Business of Software, and some of these that were like, only a few of the talks were relevant to the very, very bootstrapping I was doing. And now even MicroConf, and years ago, they split into 2 tracks. I don't know where they are anymore, but the last time I looked, and this is no criticism of them, it's just like, I never was able to go up with all the other people that were going up. And so then they were all, you mentioned being a couple of rungs ahead of me. They were ladders ahead of me. And so it stopped being pertinent. And I also took my foot off the gas and aimed a little smaller, and again, qualifying them more as side hustles and stuff like that. And so it's like, I go back and forth, right? Pride. At the end of my life, I would love to have owned a gajillion-dollar company, or more importantly to me, honestly, would be to have a gajillion user product, because it's just more fun, frankly, and presume that money would come out of it and stuff like that. But it's like, what are my actual goals? Like, why at 46 do I code extracurricularly? It's a hobby. I love it. Okay. But what are the goals? Are there still goals? Am I still trying to earn millions of dollars? Like, it's like, I always talk about, I don't know. I don't actually know anybody who makes canoes, but I always talk about I love the idea of a person who, because I think it's the most frivolous thing I can think of. And that's that. And I don't mean that negatively, but as a hobby, like in your garage, taking up most of a car bay, So one of your cars probably has to be parked in the driveway so that you can make a canoe. I guarantee you don't need a canoe. And the world doesn't need another canoe. There are canoes that you could go buy, probably get one for free, because everybody buys a canoe and then never ends up using it. That's, at least that was my family growing up. But anyway, it's like, that to me is the epitome of a hobby. It's pure love. Absolutely nothing in the world needs or requires or even probably encourages you to build a canoe, but you want to, so you're going to do it. And then I look at what I'm doing, and it's like, okay, well, if the end goal of a canoe is that you can put it in the water and paddle it around, right? It's like, so the end goal for me for building a product is users, is people using it. And then I'm like, look, I brought value or joy or productivity or, something that it's validating. But but in the grand scheme of things, like, there was a time when I was like, the goal is to make $1 gajillion. Now it's like I've gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. Now it's to make a good product that people use. And it's like, is that because I have failed so many times that my expectations have gone down, down, down? Or is that still, I've for myself, I have distilled it down to, that's the first real spark. And then you kind of ideally grow a fire from there, right? If you've got people using something, then you've got something, presumably. And then that's where you're the fuel and I'm the spark, or whatever, that's where you and I collaborate, because fire takes three things. And so you probably can't do it yourself, or you don't want to. The idea of cool people working together to build something bigger and bigger and bigger. And so part of the joy is, like, I was talking about the startup in Nashville. I was texting with the CEO this weekend, and and that was at least 10 years ago. So it's like friendships that last, or fond memories, or war stories, or, I don't know. It's hard to, I'm totally rambling, but it's harder to quantify now for me, like, why on earth I do this, but I do it and it brings me joy. And maybe that's all I need.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about hobbies, and historically I've been like, I don't have hobbies. I have work and I have a home life. And work was always my hobby. I mean, I would say even before I had so much fun, it was like a hobby, I guess. And most of the business was fun, and I didn't have time and want to have time for other, quote, hobbies. Like, I had to be productive. When you said hobby, it's like, when you're talking about the canoe, I go, there's a reason the person makes space in the garage, and the significant other probably goes, we don't have any garage, it's the canoe. But I go, that energy, that passion needs to take up space in your life somehow. And I go, so I haven't had those. I do have two motorcycles in the garage that don't work. But like, what takes up space? I guess I was thinking, what takes up space? And this is it. This is part of this. So, like, we talked about it, and your thoughts on hobbies have helped me so much more. I still think about it as, for some reason, it's hard for me to do something just for the value of doing it, the joy of doing it. I do have joy in doing things that build. I just want the practical something to the end. But I go, this time should take up space in my life because I enjoy it. Right. For that only value. That's something that did not exist probably a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, in my mind, in my heart, because I was like, well, it's just extra. It does takes up, just like the canoe in the garage takes up space that other things could be there. But I go, no, enjoy talking to you. Enjoy having these conversations. Enjoy tinkering with these products. This is our little garage hobby, my version, because I don't physical things, you build fences and stuff. I don't really do a lot of that. Don't feel like I have always the ability and patience to do it. But I was like, hobby that builds. That's my version of hobby, is something, even when I could say my reading hobby, my hiking hobby, for me, it still builds. I need that part. It's just it
Yep.
connects somewhere back. Like I can say, my daughter and send her home, of course, this summer. We'll go to the swimming pool. The value of that is rest and recuperation and enjoying time with them. That checks my something that builds,
Sure.
thing. But I don't know, as you're talking, I was like, no, this time should take up that space. It has taken up the last 6 months, I think. We're in our 18th session.
Yeah. I love that you say it that way. Like, I think the hard part is, again, settling it in your own mind and then explaining it to other people.
Yeah.
And I know that we've struggled a little bit, where to my wife, it looks like I'm working all the time. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and sometimes I am, and sometimes it's work, but it's not earning me any money. And sometimes it's fun and it's not earning me any money. And it's, and it's like the four quadrants of earns money or doesn't, and it's fun or it isn't, but, and it's client work or it's not. And I know that, like, my folks struggle with this too. My folks are retired, but my dad still writes papers, using research that he did during his career as a forester. And it just brings him joy. And my mom's like, get off the damn computer. Go play golf. We're retired. That's not the retirement she wants, but it's the retirement he wants, and so it's sometimes it's hard to explain or show to other people, like, this is okay. This is what I want to do. It's like, as long as you're getting enough exercise and vitamin D, but it's, and it's funny because people will look at gaming, it's like, oh, well, you're 10, 12 hours a day in front of the TV going zap, 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 or whatever, we'll go, okay, that's fine. That's a hobby. It's like, it may or may not be the healthiest. Me sitting here typing, building something, and I'm not judging one against the other, obviously, but it's hard to, it's not as easy to demonstrate that it's the same sort of thing of like, no, this is fun,
Oh yeah. Self-care is all in the rage, and I'm glad it is. But I go, it's such an abstract concept for me. But because I try to be pretty practical with things, but I go, that time and space is valuable to me. And you put the other part, is it seen as value by others? And that's another conversation. But I go, what I'm trying to do is, like, I don't have those things. Maybe I don't consciously have those things take up space that I go, this is me, this is for me.
Right.
It's for others but me. And this whole concept of take up space, what the heck does that talk about? It means, for me personally, being in a line, not worrying about everybody else necessarily, worrying about me too. I'm okay to be in this space. There's a great person on Instagram talking about Enneagram. And I'm an Enneagram 9, which is peacemaker archetype. And the one thing they said, take up space. And I said, I think I'm starting to get that now, from canoe in the garage to standing in line. And you know what? I'm in this part and I'm going to take this particular space, for myself.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to hobbies. Is now, of course, communication with significant others and all that stuff. But I go, it's one added element. I think our conversations have been so enriching for me, is just to go, it's okay. This time, our async time takes up space. And what I increasingly see is limited time,
yeah,
and energy. But I go, I wanted to take up space. I want to take up that space. And, that's the ember that I think keeps me coming to this. And then, you never know. You just never know.
Yep.
So, like, we're not losing our house, families, all this stuff, like you said earlier.
Yep.
So, good reflection on a Wednesday.
So, I think both of us have limited availability for a while, but as we've said, so the only thing that is tugging at my sleeve, given the reflection that we've just done, like I would be okay if time went by, but the little bit that's nagging at me is that we are really close. Like I have something working, and so I think that's going to drive me soon to again start putting in a few hours here and there, to try to get something out the door, for you to use, for me to use, and as quick as we can get it on the website, and so it's for sale, like, and there it is, and people can try it, and
we were talking about our
don't think that's a
featured
big way.
images that post says that are gonna. We got this new theme and staging we're going to be launching before WordCamp US. I'll say July 1st. And realizing thumbnails on the featured image on the archive pages, how we're going to do the featured images in the post, going to need to change as an awareness thing from the post edit client side. And I go, this is going to be good. We'll keep iterating on those. With when you're able to get the new update is, I think there'd be a lot of good feedback there, to how does that look on that home? How does that look on the inside page? That I think is that cornerstone to value for.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I think it's good timing. When you get the new update, put it on staging, start trying it out. We'll have another round of feedback.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, baby steps or big steps sometimes,
Yeah.
but keep moving forward.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, my friend.
Yeah. Great talking as ever.
You too. Talk to you next week.